Hi, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and continue our discussion on gender. And in class, we left off talking about the gender stereotypes and how those affect people's sexuality, again, especially in heterosexual dynamics, where you have a man and a woman, and they tend to feel perhaps confined by gender role expectations. This slide discusses that obviously we've made a more recent trend away from some of those rigid stereotypes, and also acknowledging that there's enormous ethnic and cultural variation in gender roles. So the culture you grew up in might have very rigid gender roles that are very traditional for your culture. Other people may have grown up in different types of environments. So again, our country being such a multicultural nation, people are going to have different experiences of this. And one of the ways that people have challenged this in terms of their self-expression is through androgyny. These are some pictures of some of the icons, musical icons of my time in the 80s when I grew up. See if you can recognize any of them. Where people really at that time were starting to question those rigid ideas of gender self-expression and challenge it. And of course, people are doing that today as well. But I also want you to think about androgyny beyond just what people wear, what their hair looks like, etc., in terms of their characteristics. So on the board in class, we talked about some of the stereotypes when it comes to characteristics that were masculine. So we talked about things like aggressiveness, stereotypes of not feeling emotion unless it's anger. And then we talked about feminine stereotypes too, of being vulnerable, soft, overly emotional, especially when it comes to expressing things like sadness. So androgyny is really moving beyond those gender stereotypes, transcending them. So people who on psychological tests, and these are very comprehensive, these tests, will be able to, based on how they answer different questions, essentially come up with a score. Are they more traditionally masculine? Are they more traditionally feminine? And many people will fall into a category of being more androgynous, that they have both masculine and feminine characteristics. Now, what's interesting, what psychologists have done with that is they've then asked them more questions, more in-depth questions. People who fall in that, on the scale, fall more in this androgynous zone. And they found that those people may show more flexibility in their lives. So just to give an example of that, somebody who may have male or masculine assertiveness, that might serve them really well in situations like employment situations. So say somebody has been working really hard, they feel like they deserve a promotion. If somebody has that characteristic of assertiveness, they may feel really confident standing up for themselves, going to talk with a boss or a supervisor, and explaining why they deserve that raise, for instance, or that promotion. That same person, though, may then come home and find that their romantic partner that they live with had a really hard day and is really upset and perhaps needs some nurturing, which we would tend to associate stereotypically as a feminine characteristic. And so that person's able to switch gears and be very nurturing with that particular partner. So they have both of these characteristics and are able to use them as the situation essentially sees fit. So they may show more flexibility. The other thing about people who on these psychological scales identify as more androgynous is they tend to have more positive attitudes about their sexuality as well. So I want you to think for a moment about why that might be. And really, one of the reasons is that, again, if you're in relationship, interpersonal contact with other people sexually, or even just for your own sense of yourself, if you're able to adopt these different characteristics without feeling bound by these expectations and these traditional stereotypes, it might serve you really well. So we just gave the example of somebody who is able to turn on that nurturing side of them if their partner needs it. That assertiveness we talked about earlier that may work great in an office type situation or work situation can also be really beneficial for standing up for yourself within a relationship. So for saying, for instance, within your sexual relationship, hey, this isn't really working for me. Can we talk about it? Can we change something? So again, those people tend to be less constricted by stereotypes and more able to access different parts of themselves as the situation is needed. So again, people who are androgynous tend to show more flexibility in all parts of their life, but also tend to have more positive attitudes about sexuality. If you have any questions about this, email me and I'd be happy to talk to you about it more.